Thank you so much for taking time out. Obviously, here to talk about Dooba Dooba, which is going to be screening at FrightFest in London imminently. How are you feeling about the selection and the screening itself? Well, screenings, because it's one of the few films that screens twice.
Yeah, I mean, this is our first festival that's got a double screening, so that's fun. You know, you can see it twice if you miss it once. I mean, yeah, I'm just super excited to be playing at Fright Fest. This is one of the ones that we really wanted to get into, and it's our international premiere and also UK premiere. So that's really cool. And, Fright Fest is kind of the one that we were hoping to be able to do that with. So yeah,
For those that haven't done their homework, how have you been pitching Dooba Dooba to people?
I've been very badly. I've been terrible at pitching it. I always just say the log line. I say in-home security cameras watches an awkward 16-year-old girl terrorizes her well-meaning babysitter. Um, that's the way that I pitch it because I don't know what to tell them. It's like, oh, I did a found footage movie with security cameras. That might be something. My favorite sort of pithy description of it was Skinamarink with a plot. I was like, that was the one that I was going for. But I feel like I shouldn't be advertising that. So I don't know, one of those, maybe.
Well, because it's one of those films that you don't necessarily want to share too much about because it kind of, you kind of want the viewer to go in somewhat cold and then just, get taken on this journey because, this film ends somewhere very different to where it begins.
Yeah, I mean, it is good to just like not really kind of like tell people too much about what it is, but it's also, I mean, I find it hard for myself to like really, describe it, at least in a way that I'm satisfied with. So that's why I made a movie, and didn't write a book, you know.
That's fair. But how did the idea come together?
So we've been talking about doing like a found footage film, and then we'd landed on security cameras basically. It's like, oh, like this would be fun. It was sort of like post-COVID or like mid-COVID type of thing. It's like, oh, what are the movies that we can do, without anybody's permission and like, not doing a webcam movie. And so um we landed on security cameras and then it was kind of like we basically had Amna and Betsy. Amna was producer in my first film. Betsy was the lead actress in my first film, and so we're like, okay, we have these two actors. And it's kind of like, why are they hanging out? Because it's like, weird for like a 25-year-old woman and a 16-year-old girl to be hanging out. And so it was like, oh, they could be babysitting. And then kind of everything grew from there. It's like, so what's the type of 16-year-old girl who would be getting babysat? And so, and we had the house as well. So we had the house, security cameras on, and Betsy. And then the story just kind of like organically grew out of like those pieces. I didn't come into it like fully formed how everything was going to go. I sort of wrote a little more free form with it actually.
Right? That kind of comes across, I think, to a degree with the performances, how much improvisation were, Betsy and Abner allowed to do.
I mean, not so much. It was more the improvisation comes more from just not like getting lines correct. I had the scripts, and I was like, hey, like if you mess up a line, don't, like it's fine, or like you can rephrase it if you want, and if you like get off track, you miss a line, you need to go back, do that, and so that's where the improvisational nature goes. I've been saying that like most of like basically what I wrote is on screen, but I actually haven't gone back and read the script to be like, oh, how accurate is it to this? But yeah, like major there wasn't any like major improvisation. It was just to yeah, I mean it was just sort of like functional improvisation. Because you had these really long takes that we set up, and so it's like we didn't really we never really called cut that often, and took anything back. We'd sort of like have it rolling for like the camera's rolling for 20 minutes. So that's how we used improvisation. But I think partially just like not being strict to whatever I'd written, and just being like, if it sounds weird to you, you can change it, or that lends itself to just like feeling more natural.
I think that because that is something that I think is an issue with some other sort of found footage films is that, the actors are, word perfect and, they're reading like big reams of prose and stuff and delivering them in this high stress situation. It just pulls you out of it. So allowing them that flexibility to, if they flub a line, it doesn't matter, we're not going to reset, we're not going to retake because that's what, human conversation is like. Nobody is, we're not all characters from Dawson's Creek,
Yeah.
that's not how people speak in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it would have been sort of impossible to do if I was like, you gotta get it, word perfect, or if I'd been like, so precious about my dialogue. But it isn't Wes Anderson or Aaron Sorkin or anything, where it's like, you gotta get the commas right.
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, that's not how I write. That would be cool.
I mean, everything is suited to, the style. And like I say, for a found footage, you want it to feel like you're watching two strangers have a conversation with each other, where it doesn't feel like this has all been mapped out. I mean, you said there was a script, but it feels completely organic and natural to the degree of, I thought there was a lot more improvisation from them.
Yeah, and it's a comment that we get a lot. I mean, it wasn't something I was like explicitly going for, like this is how we're going to accomplish it. That was just sort of like how we did it. I also think just well, part of the real like conception of the film was doing it from this perspective of security cameras, because you know I always have felt that like security camera footage, like especially like in the internet age, always feels like hyper real. It's like it's the location from which we view crimes, or horrible things happening, or just often is from like grainy security cameras. And so I think that lends itself to really like the idea. I mean, it's like found footage itself feels kind of more real than films. But I always thought security cameras are they sort of hold this very frightening place, because it's nothing ever good happens when you're watching a security camera footage. It's like, okay, something's like, you know nobody gets married, like gets proposed to, based off of security camera footage. It's always just something horrible happens.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I for ages I was very against getting stuff like a Ring doorbell, because I've grown up on horror films and stuff, and there is something really terrifying about getting like a notification in the middle of the night and you go in the Ring door and then it's just like a fox or a cat, then a neighbor's cat running across the lawn. But there is something really disturbing about just like logging in and checking, even when it is something completely mundane.
Yeah, it could be anything. Yeah, it's uh, yeah. I used to have a Ring doorbell, and it was always like I was always expecting to see someone come in, and be like, "Oh, I didn't want to see that person was at my house," Like sometimes you'd rather just be a little more ignorant. Uh,
Yeah, because I mean the camera, the cameras are something that I really like about this one, particularly the angles because it's these security cameras and hidden cameras. So many of the compositions aren't, I guess, what you would term as a traditional typical one. You don't necessarily have your main characters fully in frame. They've got the back to the camera, or you can only see part of them, and that makes the film more terrifying, I think. Did you kind of realize that when you were doing it? Because there's just that thing of, well, I can see this, but it's what I can't see that I'm scared of, even though there might not necessarily be anything happening yet. Like I was hooked and terrified from about minute three, I think. It's like, what can't I see?
yeah, I mean. Well, I've always thought that like what you can't see is like really the power of found footage. And I actually wasn't sure how well, you'd be able to do that with security cameras because I mean like with a traditional found footage like camcorder movie, basically like the audience is just like one single camcorder that's going around, and if the camera's going to move it has to be like motivated by something that somebody's doing inside the scene, or it has to be perfectly framed watching the thing. But like so much of like just hearing a sound of like the people being chased around the camera, and you can't see any of that, and your view is restricted. But with the security cameras, sort of the way I, initially like approach it is that you don't necessarily have that excuse because, I mean, in theory, the security camera at any moment could switch to the thing that you're watching, that you should be watching, it is like instead of being like hyper subjective, like a security camera, like a camcorder is, it's hyper objective, because it can go anywhere. So that was certainly something that I was thinking about of just like, um, I mean, it is still constrained. I wasn't sure how much you could kind of get away with until you kind of like got into the editing room. Um, uh, and I realized sort of like the concern about, oh, well, you could cut to anywhere was sort of like actually not real. Because the audience sort of agrees with whatever you're choosing. They're not like, wait, don't, is there another shot that you could see that thing going on? Um, but in the way that we sort of like framed everything, there were some shots that we kind of like framed and like blocking that we did that would be like, hey, kind of try to be here. But I was excited to just kind of like let it flow and be like, okay, yeah, if you're like off camera, just like half of your face is like showing, that's great. And sort of those awkward framings and things not fully being in focus is what I had wanted to do with it. And there was a few times maybe where like things were explicitly planned, but I kind of like tried to let it go. And a lot of the punch-ins, I would sort of do different, try to make the framing awkward as possible, or like just keep things off of frame that like the audience wants to see. A lot of it like can come down to just like cutting, It's like, hey, like if this is a point at which like you would think you'd cut to this other person in this conversation, if you hold on this person here, it's like, hey, like I want to see what's going on over there. And that whatever, it's always the stuff happening off screen that's worse than uh what's on screen. But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. That was a long answer.
Yeah. No, I mean, found footage, can be tricky to make feel fresh, and I think that Dooba Dooba, certainly manages to pull that off. How much work went into making sure that you weren't repeating something that you'd seen before? Was it an opportunity to just sit down and watch a load of found footage and make notes? How did you kind of go about making sure that
Uh,
this wasn't just a Blair Witch clone?
Yeah, no, so it was the opposite of watching a bunch of found footage. I sort of avoided found footage. Um, um, I don't know if that was like the right way to go about it. That's just what I did. I think that like part of me was always afraid that like I would see something that was like, oh shit, dang, they did it. So I just kind of, it was sort of like, hey, we're kind of doing this thing and kind of for better or worse, try to accomplish it. And I felt if I like watched too many other things, or really anything, it would be, I just would, you know, I would risk seeing something that was like the thing I wanted and then be disappointed, or like sort of just go down that path. Uh, but it was a lot of, as far as sort of like developing the style of it. I mean, it was a lot of kind of experimentation throughout it. When we started, like I didn't know if like a security camera movie would work. Just like from security cameras, we'd flown out to Georgia, and I was like, I have no idea if like this looks good as a movie. Um, and so then like we shot the first day, and like I cut it together, and I was like, oh no, like that works, like that, like actually like cut together, that felt like something was happening. So it's like, don't worry, we have a movie. Um, But with all the punch-ins and things, like that was something that had developed because if you have like a whole movie that like plays out just from security cameras and it's like these really far back, and you're like never like in someone's face, it just doesn't work. It works on a scene-to-scene basis, I felt, but like as a whole movie, like the duration of that, you just sort of zone out. And so that was like, for example, like something that we had kind of like discovered out of necessity of like, okay, no, you have to punch in, and it made the whole like edit process like, okay, now we got to re-edit the film with that. But I mean, a lot of the inspiration came from sort of like more of the aesthetics comes from just online like analog horror, like YouTube stuff. Um, and so watched that more than anything, but didn't watch a whole lot of that kind of for similar reasons, but kind of like just tried to take inspiration from that. But so yeah, that would be where a lot of that is. But it was a process.
Yeah. And the film, obviously, the film's already screened at Panic Fest. What was the reaction out of there?
I think they really liked it at Panic Fest. Nobody yelled at me, so I think they liked it. Yeah, people were saying "Dooba Dooba" to us the rest of the week. But yeah, I mean, our the reaction has been pretty pretty universally positive. At least it seems, at least from the people, you don't hear from the people who don't like your movie.
Well,
So
I mean, I think you do. I think, that those people are often very loud on the internet. So
oh
if you've not heard
oh
any of that,
oh
then
yeah,
I
on the
would take that
internet.
as a very good sign. So,
Yeah, on the internet, yes, on Letterboxd, you get some people, and I'm like, yeah, I'm always you always like focus on the bad reviews more than the good ones. But yeah, I hate it when they write one sentence. I'm like, you could write some more than one sentence if you're gonna, if you're gonna hate my movie. If you like my movie, you can write as little or as much as you want. But if you didn't like it, you gotta. Uh, but yeah.
obviously, it's you kind of want that feedback, don't you? And that kind of like almost like right to reply because sometimes films hit us at the wrong time. That might be they weren't in the right headspace for this sort of film. They might have been expecting a slasher film sort of thing. So yeah, you kind of give a little bit more so that you can go, well, okay, well they were expecting this and it's not that, so that's cool. I can move on from that one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the ones that hurt me the most is like I was really hoping to like it, but I just was boring. That's the ones that I'm like, okay, well, it sounds like you would have been a fan. You can't just be so, like this was an interesting idea. I wish they'd done a better job with it. But, so it goes.
Well, obviously I don't know those people, but I personally disagree. I saw this film for Panic Fest and it still lives in my brain. I can't wait for more people to understand why Dooba Dooba is a pretty creepy phrase these days. So I'm quite looking forward to it. But what do you hope that the Fright Fest audience get from watching this film? Because I mean the screen it's one of the ones that's a little bit more insular and it feels like the perfect kind of screening environment for this film because I mean a lot of the time it's with a big action film it's like see this on the biggest screen possible, but this one kind of feels like see it on the most intimate screen possible so that you get really sucked into this story.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, I always want to watch it on a CRT, with just a CRT with 10 people in a living room. That's how I wanted to, see this film. Um, uh, I I mean, like I just hope that, people like the film and, go to see it and hopefully feel that it's like, I mean, I like wanted to feel fresh, whether people like it or not. Like I just hope it's interesting. That's more kind of like you whatever you like. You want a reaction from people. Um, but yeah, I'm just happy that people are seeing the film. So that's what I want.
Well, thank you for your time and best of luck with the screening.
All right, thank you so much. Yes, I'm very excited. But I hope that people come out for it. Thank you.